Hello, and welcome to Booked Solid, New Canaan Library's podcast for young adults, new adults, and the forever young adult at heart. I'm your regular host, Kathleen.
And I'm your new host, James. I'm an adult services librarian, and you might remember me from the previous episode where it was announced that I'll be taking over for Sam. And I believe that Kathleen has an announcement.
I do. So I've actually left teen services, and I'm now a collections librarian. But the good news is that we are still going to be covering YA books and books with crossover appeal for our young adult and new adult listeners.
And that's why we're both very excited that our first episode together is going to be on Circe by Madeline Miller, which is a great book that also has a lot of YA appeal. And before we discuss it any further, I think that I should just give a brief summary of the book. So, in the house of Helios, god of the sun and mightiest of the Titans, a daughter is born. But Circe is a strange child, not powerful like her father, nor viciously alluring like her mother. Turning to the world of mortals for companionship, she discovers that she does possess power, the power of witchcraft, which can transform rivals into monsters and menace the gods themselves. Threatened, Zeus banishes her to a deserted island, where she hones her occult craft, tames wild beasts, and crosses paths with many of the most famous figures in all of mythology, including the Minotaur, Daedalus, and his doomed son Icarus, the murderous Medea, and, of course, wily Odysseus. But there is danger, too, for a woman who stands alone, and Circe unwittingly draws the wrath of both men and gods, ultimately finding herself pitted against one of the most terrifying and vengeful of the Olympians. To protect what she loves the most, Circe must summon all her strength and choose once and for all whether she belongs with the gods she is born from or the mortals she has come to love.
All right, so one of the reasons that we picked Circe and we're really excited to talk about this for our first episode is it is our Lit Lunch pick for this year. So Lit Lunch is an annual tradition at the library. So on November 10th at the Woodway Country Club, Madeline Miller will actually be speaking about this book, and we hope to get people excited about it a little before then.
And before we talk about the book, what we felt about it, and elements that we thought were really interesting, just a quick spoiler warning. We are going to be talking about pretty much everything that happens in the book. So if you haven't read the book, I think we would both probably highly suggest that you give it a read before you give this podcast a listen.
Sounds good. All right. So sometimes we start with a what do you think, but you already were like, I love this book so much.
I did spoil it.
But I can say what I thought.
Okay.
Which is, and I think you were wondering if I would like it because I don't read a lot of mythology. And this was something that I probably wouldn't have picked up by myself, but I thought it was so great, and I really did enjoy it.
Yeah, I also enjoyed it, as I may or may not have said before. We even started discussing it. I picked this book up probably around when it first came out, when I first read it, and I loved it. I'm a big fan of mythology, and so seeing this on the shelves, I gobbled it up in a couple nights, and I came away from it just thinking it was incredible, and I was so happy that this was going to be the first book that we read for the new season of the podcast, because it's just such a great book. Do you have anything you want to kind of point out, any things that stood out to you?
Well, one thing that I'm interested in is coming from the perspective of I had to study mythology in school. I had some familiarity with these characters a bit, but I don't know a lot about it. So I guess I was curious, the appeal of this book, if you're a big fan of mythology versus if you don't know a lot. Is that different? Is the reading different? Did you feel like you're revisiting all of your friends as you hear? There are a lot of these characters that are the big names, the greatest hits of the Greek gods and the characters in Greek mythology.
Yeah, so as someone who really enjoys mythology, but who is not critically a classic scholar or a scholar of these kinds of myths and this kind of writing, like Madeline Miller is, I believe she is a scholar of these.
Yes, she does have a background in this. So so she's drawing from not just like the Odyssey or the things I've heard of, but she's drawing from a lot.
Which is something that I actually really do enjoy when you're speaking about, not coming from a background where you've read a lot of these myths and just enjoy them that much. So I love those myths. I love the Odyssey, and one thing I really loved about this is the amount of mythology that Madeline Miller draws from in order to tell this story. she's said that she has used the actual Greek myths, with the Odyssey being the obvious example, but also she's pulling material from Ovid's Metamorphoses, and other texts for just inspiration and ideas of the source material to bring on. And like you said before too, like people are stopping by on Circe's island to interact with her, to get something from her, and she does appear in a couple of these major mythological stories. And it's really fascinating too, especially with this book, because when she makes appearances in those original texts that this book draws from, she's not ever the main character. The stories really never focus on her as a person who is the primary driver of any kind of action or narrative thrust. She's either like an obstacle, or she's someone who helps out the hero who is going on a quest. And in this book, when it gives her the kind of interiority that you really wouldn't see in any of these myths, I really loved that, because she's an interesting character in this book. And while this book is, it feels like something that imagines like that interiority that I believed, it was believable, and it felt like one of those myths. Not like textually one of those myths, because this book, probably compared textually to the actual text, like the original tellings, would look really weird and different, because that's just not how the stories were told back then. Like, this is completely different of how they would be told. But it has that kind of verisimilitude, this kind of a truthfulness, where I wouldn't imagine this being, in my mind, like it fits in that space of like, these are like kind of where the Greek myths live in my brain, and this book kind of fits nicely into there, where I'm like, oh, this could be like somebody's perspective on this. So I really loved that.
Yeah, I agree that I think she does a great job of, I think there's, in an interview she did, she kind of talks about taking Circe and taking that kind of, as you said, this character who's an obstacle or who's like helping men. Like, all of these women characters don't really do a lot. But then she's just like, well, what if this was the epic? And so I think it's really cool to see that, because it does feel like it is on an epic scale. But as you said, I mean, it does have that interiority. It is very believable as the character. I mean, she's doing all the things you want her to do. She's turning men into pigs. She's, I mean, all of the things that you want when you get Circe, she's doing them. But I think there's also a lot of, well, why is she doing them? And those questions are not answered in the original text, but they are here.
Yeah, and then like in those kind of original stories too, there's the things that the stories focus on. The acts of great heroism, the valiant fighting, the cunning of Odysseus, the strength of Hercules, Jason's leadership. Those kinds of classic mythological figures. And then in this one, I really love how Circe's tasks, the way that she's working at her witchcraft, and working at kind of finding who she is, and working through the things she's desperately trying to figure out about herself. That is given the same kind of importance as those heroes' own journey in this, which I thought, and it does so in a way where I wasn't like, oh, this is clumsily done. This feels like a legitimate reimagination and retelling in a way that is always so delightful to discover when you're reading these kinds of books.
Yeah, and I think it is when you're talking about these different sorts of strengths that maybe these traditional, the male characters from Greek mythology that we're seeing. She obviously has strengths in a different way, but the idea that she's the first witch, basically. And one of the things that's interesting too is she's largely on an island.
Yes.
Alone. So, I mean, later on, she lives there with her son, and there are people, but mostly it's people coming to her from the island, and occasionally, she goes to visit her sister to help her give birth to the Minotaur.
To the dismay of Crete, yes.
So I think it's really interesting, though, to see how we have a character who would not have a lot of agency, and in fact the way that she could possibly have agency, it seems like how is Madeline Miller going to pull that off? How is that going to be something that I want to read about for over 300 pages? But you absolutely do, because it does feel epic in spite of all of that. So yeah, I mean, we touched upon the plot a bit in the intro to the book, and I think one of the interesting things is it's not so much that there is much of an overarching plot. It's kind of episodic, and and there are different people who come into her life who even I know as not a big mythology reader. So what did you think about maybe some of these different, almost like vignettes or almost like little just chapters in her life? And she's, lived like thousands of years, so obviously there are a lot of moments in her life.
Yeah, this is gonna get old, but I loved it. I loved looking at her kind of different stages of life and how the people she meets kind of informs her ideas and opinions of things. And it highlights her strengths and her weaknesses as well. Like a big thing about these myths also is like the heroes have weaknesses. They have flaws, and those flaws get them into trouble. And Circe has flaws too. She can become very proud at times. And I like how kind of that pride is, she kind of looks at that and examines it kind of over the course of the book. And she kind of tones that down a little bit. So I really enjoyed the kind of vignettes where it's kind of different slices of her life, and as she's kind of growing as a person and as a character, and she's encountering different kinds of struggles, be that when she's a child, or as much of a child as a nymph can be in this world, in the halls of her father, who's this domineering, overpowering, completely unimaginable presence of just pure potential and strength, just completely overwhelming everything. And she's desperate for that kind of attention and to be part of something, and she doesn't get it, versus her being sent to the island and she's alone. She's exiled. Her family basically said they don't want her, and she's trying to figure out how to come to terms with that. And then just her getting people coming to her and asking for her help, getting leave to go help people, and then just kind of finding herself too. I really loved just following the little vignettes and how they kind of let you check in on her. And they could connect very nicely too. So you can definitely view them as little vignettes, but they're very smooth. So it's not like, oh, this is like a book of short stories about Circe. It kind of flows very nicely.
Absolutely. And yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned growth and kind of this. One of the things that is kind of emphasized is that gods are unchanging. And so there's sort of maybe this push and pull between these characters who are unchanging, and then obviously the mortals who are changing and eventually die. And in the span of Circe's life, they are really barely a blip. But I think the interesting thing about her is that this idea of growth, this idea of especially, transformation, we see her transforming others, sometimes in negative ways, as with the men into pigs, or Scylla, for example, which she does feel a tremendous amount of guilt about. But also Glaukos turning into a god, things like that. But it really is, I think, beyond that. The interesting thing is that it is her own story of transformation, and maybe she doesn't have the best self-knowledge initially, because I think she makes a lot of bad choices.
Oh, yes.
And very frustrating.
Although I think one of the original choices that she makes for herself is a really interesting one, where she provides aid to Prometheus when he's in the halls.
Oh, yes.
And she goes against the wishes of what she basically knows her father, and she gives him a little comfort, and he kind of responds to that. And I like how her first kind of decision for herself to do that thing is actually one of the freeing agents at the end of the book, when she negotiates with Helios, where she says she has some leverage over him, saying, I did this against your wishes, and if Zeus found out, what would he do? It's just kind of like, it's a calling back to that moment of her first truly kind of like independent things, where she's desperate to try something, and she does it.
Yeah. That's such a great moment, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because, we see the way it reverberates in different ways throughout the text. And so I think that's one of the reasons why the ending feels kind of inevitable, because you're seeing already she's so drawn to Prometheus and what he's done and his connection to mortals, and she realizes that she's not firmly planted in this world of gods and these big, halls where no one really likes her very much.
No.
And she has this weird mortal voice, basically. So I think she's always had one foot kind of in two different worlds. But the Prometheus stuff is so great, because then, you do see at the end how that all kind of comes together and makes sense.
And I think that's super important too, just thinking about how, how people don't like her. Like, she does connect to the mortals, and the reason why I think part of that is not only just because of her physical features are kind of alienating her slightly from the gods, and her voice is also alienating her from the gods, which I think is something that Madeline Miller mentioned was something that really drew her to the character. It's just like the voice, like the how her voice sounded. But But more importantly, just her family was like completely controlling and dominating her at all times, expecting her to do things. There's such like it felt like a very mercenary relationship there, very transactional. Even her siblings were like terrible to her. Her brother, who she loved, turned out to be just a horrific jerk the whole time.
Yeah.
Just completely using her and then just kind of discarded her completely. And then, so the times that she actually has any kind of weird positive engagement is through mortals. She meets mortals, and they come to her expecting her to be like the gods. These kinds of unchanging, dominating presences that control and rule their lives. And she tries to act similar to that at times, especially, her first outings when she goes with Daedalus to help deliver the Minotaur, right? Like, they treat her like she is some kind of god, and she's kind of reinforcing that, but she's uncomfortable with it in a way. Like when she confronts the fact that they have to go by Scylla, right? And they're like, "Thank you, gods," and she's like, "I did this. Like, I created this mess for you, and it's going to be killing you guys forever. Like, I did this. Why are you thanking me?" And that's not something, a god would do. A god isn't going to be like, "Yeah, I did this," and a god would be like, "I created this, and you're going to deal with it." And it's going to make some really cool hero stories later. But, she's like, she's angry about this. And she kind of cloaks that in her, like, imperiousness of, like, a god being like, "Oh, I'm above this. I'm above your question." But that's a cool moment. I really like, there's so many good moments in this book. There's good
really
little moments.
Yeah. No, I think that's the thing. I think we could kind of go on all day where it's like, "Oh, yeah, remember that thing."
Her relationship with Daedalus. Her entire, her relationship with Odysseus in this book is really cool. Odysseus as a character is such a complicated character in the original text of the myth. And I think Madeline Miller does a great job kind of exploring that with his time on Circe's Island, because he's a really huge person in her life in this. She has a son with him. She eventually marries his other son.
Yeah, I mean, that was interesting.
The gods, the great world of the gods is truly beyond us mortal kin. But there's so many great moments, and it's really hard to cover them all. One thing I really loved, I'm not sure if you remember this, but when there's a moment where Odysseus and Circe are talking, and I think Circe mentions that she has the loom that Daedalus made.
Yeah.
And then he's looking at his hands, and Odysseus is like, "Yeah, I couldn't do that. Like, I would, like, destroy my hands and stuff like that." And then Circe remembers, like, seeing Daedalus's hands, and they were just scarred and just dented, because that's, like, because he worked for his mastery.
Yeah.
And Odysseus worked for his own mastery too, but there's, like, some kind of disconnect between, like, these great figures, and just an incredible moment. And one that I think leaves an impression on Circe, especially towards the end of the book, where she is really the last page of the book, where she's ruminating on, am I going to take this final step? Do I want to become mortal? Do I want to use my transformation to become this? Thinking of aging and the kind of way that life and experiences leave scars and impressions on you, to not be like the gods who are unchanging and born perfect. They don't need that kind of sampling or of experience.
Yeah, and I think that is so interesting too, when there's this reversal of how she thinks about the gods being unchanging as maybe a good thing or like a perfect form, and then she's like, that's basically the closest thing to death. I mean, there's no growth, there's no real excitement. It's just this constant. And maybe there are downsides to that, which the gods don't really see, but that she is reflecting on.
Like a callousness, right? Like she's seen this kind of, she's experienced the callousness of the gods for most of her life.
Yeah, her especially.
Yeah, she's experienced that side of things, and she's seen how people react to gods. And then also, but as a woman too, she's got a whole set of other problems. She's a woman alone on an island, and these, the pirates are coming in, and they're trying to have their way with her, so she turns all into pigs. But, like, she has to learn these lessons, and they're rough lessons. No other divinity in this pantheon is going to kind of experience these kinds of hard, bad lessons that Circe does. And she does learn from those lessons, and she makes choices. She grows as a character. She has, like, a really, like, coming-of-age kind of journey. Like, a lot of YA books will have some coming-of-age kind of stuff, and Circe does have that. She learns from her family, the way they treat her. She finds her own family with Odysseus' other son. I think it's Telegonus, I believe.
Yeah, so her son with Odysseus, Telegonus, and then Telemachus is his son with Penelope.
That's right.
And, it's so funny when you bring up those characters that reading this, and my only knowledge of Circe is her connection to Odysseus, and I'm like, okay, when he shows up, that's when the story really starts.
It's go time.
It's go time. And the funny thing is, like, I mean, obviously there are so many great scenes there, and that is really great, but that is just kind of like a blip in her life, and then there's so much other stuff, and so I don't know how to say this, but like everyone's life is a little bit better after Odysseus dies.
Not Odysseus.
Well, not Odysseus. That's too bad for him. But I mean, so we have. So what happens is very Greek, I guess. This tragedy.
Very Greek tragedy.
So she has this son with Odysseus that he doesn't even know about. Telegonus goes to sail to meet his father, and he's been given this.
A spear made of the stinger of a legendary mythological beast that even the gods are afraid of, because the gods. Another thing in the book, another great quote from the book is about the gods loving to see pain happen, but fearing it the most because it's so alien to them. And this stinger from this beast, if you poke someone with it, if you poke a mortal with it, they're dead. It's going to kill them. If you poke a god with it, they're going to be in pain forever. So the gods are not going to bother anybody who has this thing. So
right, and so the amazing thing is that she basically just asks for it, and she's the only one who's like willing to take the consequences, and so she's just given it. So she has this kind of this courage, this bravery, and so she's like, I'm going to give it to my son to protect him, and he takes it with him on his journey, which, you know, it's an intense journey to begin with, but then it turns out that time and his experiences and, you know, being away from Ithaca for so long has made Odysseus weird. Has made him.
And Athena's also been Athena, the goddess of wisdom, who's Odysseus' patron, famously in the Odyssey. She's egging him on constantly because she wants to see this man become more than he is all the time. The gods are always pushing for that kind of thing in these kinds of stories. You'll see them interacting a lot, and she's been pushing him, and he's kind of lost in his own mind. So it's a rough time for Odysseus. It's not the reunion that Telegonus is expecting, because in fact Odysseus basically rushes him and would kill him, except then he brushes against the spear and dies immediately. As he warns him not to. Yeah. He doesn't listen, and then it's a tragedy.
So it's awful, and I'm thinking, what's going to happen next? But then he's like, by the way, he sails back. Hey, Mom, I brought the wife of the man who you had this son. I mean, like, I don't expect that Penelope and Circe are going to have anything in common or have anything good to say to each other. And then also Telemachus, who is Telegonus is about 16 at this point. Telemachus is about 30. And this is Odysseus' son, who grew up largely without his father because he was trying to get home for all of those years. And then he helped his father murder a bunch of suitors.
Yep. Famous scene.
And so a lot has happened.
And he has the right to basically kill Circe's son because he's murdered. He's murdered his father. So there's a lot of tension in this scene.
And I'm thinking it's all going to go badly, and then it turns out, one, that they're like, oh, we saw what happened, and we totally believe your son, and we bear him no ill will, which was amazing.
Yep.
And then they all kind of bond. Eventually, Penelope becomes like a witch.
Yep. It's implied that she could become a witch based on her experience. And Circe gets with
Telemachus.
And
which is weird, but, I mean...
It's,
good for her.
Greek myth. Weirder things have happened in Greek myth.
Exactly.
But it's honestly an incredible journey. Circe deciding at the end to become mortal, to take that risk, that potential life, that potential future into her hands, deciding for herself, pushing her family away and choosing this new family. Really just incredible. A great character that Madeline Miller has drawn from inspiration, from all the myth. Clearly a well-loved character, a well-loved story by the author. Just probably one of my favorite books in recent memory, honestly. I truly found this book to be an incredible experience, and I'm going to give it my recommendation, I think. I think I recommend people read this book.
Well, hopefully you already have if you listened this far, because
yes.
We just spoiled everything.
We did just spoil everything.
Because, in fact, even though, most people have read the Odyssey or familiar with but there's so much that happens that you would not know about because this is so focused on Circe, who is really such a minor character. And yeah, I absolutely loved it too. I had a great time, and I think that's the thing is, I was a little nervous. This isn't necessarily my thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I wondered if I was going to find it just a little too outside my wheelhouse. But I think, as you said, with the interiority, this is such a character study. And I really felt for Circe, and I really was fascinated by her. And I really liked it. So there were so many great passages. The writing was really beautiful. But I did have just one quote that I wanted to share to give kind of an idea of Madeline Miller's writing, and one of the things that I thought was so interesting with Circe being a witch, which is such a cool part of the book that we touched upon a little bit. So yeah, so this is her talking about developing her witchcraft. Let me say what sorcery is not. It is not divine power, which comes with a thought and a blink. It must be made and worked, planned and searched out, dug up, dried, chopped, and ground, cooked, spoken over, and sung. Even after all that, it can fail, as gods do not. If my herbs are not fresh enough, if my attention falters, if my will is weak, the drafts go stale and rancid in my hands. By rights, I should never have come to witchcraft. Gods hate all toil. It is their nature. The closest we come is weaving or smithing, but these things are skills, and there is no drudgery to them, since all the parts that might be unpleasant are taken away with power. The wool is dyed not with stinking vats and stirring spoons, but with a snap. There is no tedious mining. The oars leap willing from the mountain. No fingers are ever chafed, no muscles strained. Witchcraft is nothing but such drudgery. Each herb must be found in its den, harvested at its time, grubbed up from the dirt, culled and stripped, washed and prepared. It must be handled this way, then that, to find out where its power lies. Day upon patient day you must throw out your errors and begin again. So why did I not mind? Why did none of us mind? I cannot speak for my brothers and sister, but my answer is easy. For 100 generations I had walked the world drowsy and dull, idle and at my ease. I left no prints, I did no deeds. Even those who had loved me a little did not care to stay. Then I learned that I could bend the world to my will, as a bow is bent for an arrow. I would have done that toil 1,000 times to keep such power in my hands. I thought, this is how Zeus felt when he first lifted the thunderbolt.
It's so good. It's just great, and it calls back to, it really, the book does give a lot of focus to the kind of work that she's doing. It says that this is the kind of stuff that is it's equivalent to the great heroic adventures of those other people. This is a type of work that is equally valuable. And she kind of says, at the end with the Zeus first with a thunderbolt, that's like a classic moment. Just there it is. Zeus is going to take out Kronos. He's going to throw down the Titans. He's going to assume his position as king of the gods. And Circe identifies this work, this drudgery, and she's like, this is it. This is also that to me. Just incredible.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. And I do like, that drudgery seems like such a weird juxtaposition there, but it's so great.
And, if you're looking for books, if you have read this book, which, again, we hope you have, if you're listening to this, and you're looking for maybe something like it or similar to it, I've gone ahead and I've looked at a couple of read-alikes. So one of them is Lavinia by Ursula K. Le Guin, which is a retelling of the Aeneid, I believe, which is focusing on the daughter of a king whose name is Lavinia, who doesn't have any words or dialogue in the original story. And this retelling by Le Guin focuses on her kind of perspective and her journey in this kind of tale. Le Guin, of course, famous author, Left Hand of Darkness, Wizard of Earthsea. So she's incredible. This is a great book. There's also The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker, which tells the story of Briseis, who was a woman from the Iliad, and this is again from Briseis' perspective. She was an important Trojan woman who became Achilles' concubine when he took her as a prize of battle, and she's forced to live in the Greek war camps and kind of observe how things are going during the war while that is happening. There's also I'm going to also recommend kind of a little bit of left field here. That's kind of like a spicy read-alike by Maria Devana Headley called The Mere Wife, which is a modern retelling of Beowulf. Not Greek anymore. We've left the Greek Isles. And it's about where the famed Herod Hall is now a fancy closed-gate suburban paradise. and the monster, Grendel, and his mother are now outsiders who are living on its fringe. And that is a really cool just retelling of a story in a brand new way with different considerations, and I really like that one. So, what's up next, Kathleen? What's next for Book Solid Podcast, Season 4, Episode 2?
All right, so Episode 2, I believe, was your pick for an interesting reason.
Oh, was it?
So we are doing Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. And you recommended this.
Recommended? Well, I thought this would be an interesting book for us to read.
So, and this is huge on Book Talk. This is Leigh Bardugo has the Grishaverse. This is her kind of fantasy world, and it is a heist novel.
Yes.
And I told you that I don't tend to read heists or like them.
You did tell me that. And I think at another point in time you mentioned that you weren't so keen on fantasy either.
I did. Yes.
But this book was blowing up on Book Talk. And, I think that we owe it to ourselves to take a look at it. Especially since, do you have any experience with her other books or any of her universe?
So I don't, because I'm not a big fantasy reader. But...
if you might be familiar with the universe of Six of Crows if you've seen the Netflix show Shadow and Bone. That's the same universe, I believe, as Six of Crows. So that's my experience with it. And I thought that this might be interesting. Let's see if we can see what we can find here and see if this is something that we might enjoy reading.
I'm curious to see what it's about. I'm willing to be proven wrong. And, I already glanced at the opening paragraph, and I was drawn in, so I'm hopeful.
And I'm willing to be looked down at by Kathleen for the next several months as she reminds me that I made her read this if she doesn't like it.
Stay tuned to find out.
Stay tuned, everyone.
All right. Well, thank you for listening.